He said it like he was commenting on the weather, casual, almost bored, while my years' worth of work evaporated in a single sentence. What he didn't know was that policies have footnotes, and footnotes have teeth. The message arrived at 6:42 p.m., precisely 12 minutes after most of the office had fled into elevators smelling faintly of burnt coffee and overachieved ambition. The subject line was sterile. Bonus update, Q4. Inside, only one sentence glowed on the screen like a cold street lamp. Your bonus isn't going through. New policy. No greeting, no explanation, just a period at the end, heavy as a locked door. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, a misdirected email, a clerical hiccup, the digital equivalent of someone else's coat in my locker. My performance reviews were flawless. Revenue exceeded projections by 18%. I had stayed through 3 rounds of restructuring, 2 leadership changes, and 1 spectacularly awkward town hall, where our manager used the phrase aggressive alignment 6 times. And now, new policy. The office was nearly silent, only the low hum of fluorescent lights and the distant whir of the cleaning crew's vacuum drifted down the hallway. My reflection in the darkened window looked composed, too composed, as if I'd already decided to accept it. That was the first mistake. I forwarded the email to myself, printed it, and slipped the paper into my notebook, the one labeled bonus policy in tidy block letters. I hadn't meant to keep that file. I'd started it during onboarding, back when optimism was still a currency I spent freely. But something about Appendix C had bothered me even then. Appendix C, the clause most people skipped, the one that defined eligibility not by manager discretion, but by measurable metrics, my metrics. I opened the shared drive and searched for the latest version of the bonus policy. The PDF blinked into view. Updated 3 weeks ago? Strange. We'd had no announcement, no all-hands memo. No exciting refinement to our compensation structure speech with pastel slides. I scrolled. Section 4.2. Management retains discretionary authority in extraordinary circumstances. Extraordinary circumstances. My chest tightened. Revenue growth was not extraordinary. It was documented, predictable, budget approved, unless something else had changed. 2 desks away, the glass office that belonged to my manager was still lit. His silhouette moved behind frosted panels, phone pressed to his ear. He laughed, a short, sharp sound. Not nervous, confident. Confident people don't expect footnotes to fight back. I knocked. He opened the door with a practiced smile, the kind that appears in performance reviews and disappears in quarterly reports. Still here? I saw the email, I said, keeping my tone level. Can you clarify what new policy means? He leaned against the desk, arms folded, defensive posture disguised as casual. Corporate adjusted the bonus policy. Budget realignment, it's across the board. Across the board. Across the board, I repeated. So no one in our division is receiving their Q4 bonus? A flicker, almost invisible. Well, adjustments were made selectively. Selectively. The word landed softly but echoed like a dropped coin in an empty hallway. I'd like to see the updated policy, I said. It's on the drive. I saw it. Appendix C hasn't changed. Silence, thin and sharp. He uncrossed his arms. Appendix C isn't the relevant section. It defines eligibility. It defines it broadly. And I exceeded every metric. Another pause, this one heavier. You're taking this personally, he said gently, like he was offering tea instead of withholding compensation. Of course I was taking it personally. My rent was personal. My student loans were personal. The weekends I spent fixing projections while he played golf were personal. But I didn't say any of that. I'd appreciate a written explanation referencing the specific clause that disqualifies me, I said instead. His smile thinned. Legal approved the changes. Legal. The word was meant to close the conversation, a velvet curtain falling over a stage, but curtains can be pulled back. Back at my desk, the air felt colder. I opened a new email. Subject: clarification request, bonus eligibility, and Appendix C. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This wasn't about confrontation. It was about documentation, about clarity, about making sure the rules that applied to everyone actually applied to everyone. I addressed it to HR. Then I added legal. If there was a new policy, it deserved daylight. Before hitting send, I reread Appendix C one more time. Paragraph 3, employees meeting defined performance thresholds shall receive the corresponding incentive compensation. Shall, not may, not could, shall. I pressed send. The message whooshed into the corporate ether, small but deliberate. Somewhere in the building, a server blinked. Somewhere else, someone's inbox would light up. And in my manager's glass office, the lights suddenly went off. He left without saying goodbye. As I packed my bag, my phone vibrated. An automated response from legal. Your inquiry has been received. Counsel will review the attached documentation. Attached documentation? I hadn't attached anything yet, which meant someone else had. I stared at the screen, pulse ticking louder than the office clock. If legal was already reviewing documentation, then this wasn't just about a new policy. It was about something filed, something formal, something with my name on it. And if I walked away now, I might never know what it was. Trust me, what surfaced next would make that single sentence in his email look almost polite. By 9:03 a.m., the office smelled of citrus cleaner and quiet anticipation. People moved differently when legal was CC'd on something. Lighter voices, straighter backs. Fewer jokes about new policy. My inbox waited for me like a sealed envelope on a courtroom desk. There it was. From Corporate Counsel. Subject: clarification request, bonus eligibility, and Appendix C, 3 words previewed in bold. We are reviewing. I exhaled slowly, set my bag down, and opened the email. Thank you for your inquiry. We are reviewing the bonus policy and related documentation, including Appendix C and any internal amendments. We will revert shortly. Internal amendments. That phrase pulsed. I hadn't seen any amendments, which meant one of two things. Either I had missed something, or something hadn't been meant for me to see. 2 cubicles down, whispers drifted like static. Did you hear? Selective adjustments. Budget realignment. Across the aisle, Martin avoided eye contact. Last week, he'd joked about finally booking his honeymoon with his Q4 bonus. Today, he stared at his keyboard as if it might betray him. I opened the shared drive again. This time, I sorted by last modified. A file flickered at the top. Bonus _ policy _ internal _ rev 3 _ final 2 .pdf final 2. A naming convention born of panic. Access restricted. My permissions, view denied. That wasn't normal. Appendix C in the public document was intact. Clean, clear, binding. So what exactly had legal received? My phone buzzed. A message from HR. We're aligning with legal. Please allow time for review. Aligning, corporate language was a ballet of avoidance. Before I could respond, my manager appeared at my desk. Not in his glass office, not behind a door, at my desk. We don't need to escalate this, he said quietly. Escalate. I requested clarification, I replied. His jaw tightened. The bonus policy has evolved. Without notice? It's leadership prerogative. Appendix C says otherwise. He glanced around to ensure no one was listening. Everyone was pretending not to. "You're creating unnecessary attention," he said. Attention, as if transparency were a fire alarm. "I'm asking for what was contractually defined," he straightened. "Bonuses are discretionary, not when tied to measurable thresholds." His silence lasted one beat too long. "You should consider how this reflects on you," he added softly. There it was, the unspoken warning. Careful. Careers are fragile things, but so are reputations and policies, especially when legal reads them aloud. By 11:17 a.m., the building's internal chat pinged. Corporate counsel. Requesting meeting at 1 p.m. with manager, HR, and employee regarding Appendix C interpretation. Interpretation. Interesting word choice. I hadn't argued interpretation. I had quoted it. The hours between 11:17 and 1 o'clock stretched like wire. My coffee cooled untouched. My heartbeat kept time with the clicking of keyboards. At 12:43, Martin finally leaned over. "Did they adjust yours too?" "Did they adjust yours?" I countered. He swallowed. "No." Selective adjustments, so it wasn't across the board, it was across me. At 12:59, I walked into the conference room, frosted glass, polished table, water glasses aligned like witnesses. Legal sat at the far end, calm, composed, legal pad open. HR beside them, my manager across from me, posture rigid, fingers laced too tightly. "Thank you for joining," counsel began. "We've reviewed the bonus policy, Appendix C in the internal revision file submitted." Submitted. I turned to my manager. He avoided my gaze. Counsel continued, voice steady. "Appendix C states that employees meeting defined performance thresholds shall receive incentive compensation. We have not identified language granting unilateral discretionary removal once thresholds are met." The room shifted. My manager cleared his throat. "The internal revision clarifies leadership discretion." Counsel nodded slowly. "The internal revision file lacks documented approval from compensation committee and was not communicated to affected employees." HR's pen stopped moving. Counsel flipped a page. "Additionally, metadata shows the internal revision was created 6 days after Q4 results were finalized." Silence fell heavy and unmistakable. 6 days after results, after my metrics were locked, after my eligibility was certain. My manager's voice thinned. "It was a budgetary necessity." "Budgetary necessity," counsel repeated evenly, "does not override binding policy without formal amendment procedure." HR shifted in their chair. Counsel closed the folder gently. "Given the absence of proper approval and notification, Appendix C remains governing." The words landed softly, but they detonated. My manager looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time since the email. There was no anger now, only calculation. And something else. Concern. Counsel's next sentence was almost kind. "Please confirm payroll has processed the incentive." The air in the room tightened. My manager's lips parted. Nothing came out. Counsel didn't blink. "Please tell me you paid her." The sentence didn't rise. It didn't accuse. It simply existed. And in that quiet, something irreversible unfolded. If you think this ended in that conference room, you're underestimating how far a paper trail can travel. If you've ever been told it's just policy, drop a comment with the clause that saved you. Sometimes the smallest line in the contract changes everything. The silence after counsel's question did not explode. It condensed. You could almost see it, thickening in the air between polished wood and filtered light, settling into the seams of the conference table. My manager's fingers, still laced together, tightened until his knuckles blanched. Payroll is processing adjustments, he said finally. Adjustments, not confirmation. Counsel tilted their head slightly. That was not the question. The clock on the wall ticked with courtroom precision. Has the incentive compensation been paid? A single bead of sweat traced a slow path from his temple to his collar. He cleared his throat. It is scheduled? Scheduled, not processed, not paid. HR's pen resumed movement, but this time the strokes were slower, heavier. Counsel nodded once and made a note. Please ensure immediate compliance. Failure to remit earned compensation exposes the company to avoidable liability. Liability, a word colder than any fluorescent light. The meeting ended without ceremony. Chairs slid back, folders closed. The performance was over, but the consequences were just taking their seats. Outside the conference room, the office buzzed in muted waves, screens glowed, conversations dimmed as I passed. Someone dropped a stapler. It sounded louder than it should have. I returned to my desk and opened my inbox. Nothing yet, no payroll notification, no confirmation, just the steady hum of anticipation. At 2:14 p.m., a calendar invite appeared on my screen. From Senior Director, Finance Subject, Alignment Discussion. Alignment again. Corporate vocabulary had a way of sounding cooperative while sharpening its edges. The meeting was set for 3 p.m. My manager did not look up when the invite hit everyone's calendars, but his jaw tightened, and that was enough. At 2:37 p.m., Martin's phone chimed. He glanced at his screen and froze. What? I asked quietly. He swallowed. They just processed mine. Processed, so payroll could move quickly. Selective adjustments. The pattern wasn't subtle anymore. My own inbox remained stubbornly quiet. By 2:59 p.m., I was standing outside the senior director's office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city's clean geometry. Glass and steel, order and reflection. Inside, finance sat beside legal. HR joined via video. My manager stood near the window, back partially turned. The director gestured for me to sit. We want to clarify next steps, she began. Her tone was measured, executive calm. There appears to have been an internal misapplication of the bonus policy. Misapplication, an elegant substitute for mistake. Legal placed a document on the table, printed, highlighted, Appendix C. Your performance thresholds were exceeded, counsel stated. There is no procedural basis for withholding your compensation. The director nodded. Payroll has been instructed to issue immediate payment. Instructed. Present tense, not completed. My phone vibrated. I didn't look at it. Not yet. Additionally, legal continued, we are reviewing the origin of the internal revision file. Origin. The director's gaze shifted, subtle but unmistakable, toward my manager. He spoke quickly. It was a draft, exploratory, never formalized. Metadata indicates it was shared with HR and payroll, counsel replied evenly. Another silence, this one sharper. The director folded her hands. We take governance seriously. Governance, that word carried weight in executive corridors. My phone vibrated again, twice, 3 times. Still, I didn't look, not until the director finished. You will receive written confirmation of your compensation and an apology for the confusion. Apology, a currency rarely spent at this level. The meeting dissolved. My manager exited first. His reflection in the glass looked smaller somehow, less certain, less untouchable. In the hallway, I finally unlocked my phone. Email notification. Subject, payroll confirmation. Q4 incentive. I opened it. Your incentive compensation has been processed. Funds will be available within 1 business day. Within 1 business day. After weeks of certainty, one sentence had tried to erase it. Now another restored it. But something else lingered. A fourth notification waited beneath the payroll email. From Corporate Counsel. Subject, follow-up, documentation request, documentation request. Not for me, for him. I lifted my eyes. Down the corridor, the senior director's door was still open. Inside, through the glass, I could see my manager seated again, alone this time, legal across from him, folder open. Appendix C lay between them like evidence. And for the first time since that 6:42 p.m. email, I wasn't the one under review. The office lights hummed overhead, steady and indifferent. But beneath that calm surface, something fundamental had shifted. Policies had teeth. Paper trails had memory. And silence, when broken correctly, had consequences. By the next morning, the office felt rearranged, even though not a single desk had moved. It was subtler than furniture. It lived in posture, in tone, in the way people paused half a second longer before finishing a sentence. My bonus landed at 8:03 a.m. I didn't open the banking app right away. I let the notification sit there, glowing quietly, like proof sealed in glass. For weeks, the conversation had been about discretion, alignment, interpretation. Now it was about numbers, exact, measurable, undeniable. Funds available, no footnote, no qualifier. Across the floor, whispers drifted in careful currents. Did you hear legal? They're reviewing process gaps. Compensation committee was looped in, which meant they hadn't been before. At 9:12 a.m., an internal memo hit everyone's inbox. Subject, clarification on bonus policy governance. The tone was pristine, corporate clean. It referenced procedural inconsistencies, reaffirmed the authority of the official bonus policy, and specifically cited Appendix C as the governing standard for performance-based incentives, specifically cited. Appendix C was no longer a quiet clause in the back of a PDF. It had a spotlight now. My manager did not send the memo. The senior director did. There was no blame in the language, no names, just correction. Correction can be more powerful than accusation. By 10:30, calendar invites began disappearing from my manager's schedule. One by one. Budget review, strategy sync, leadership alignment, canceled. At 11:05, HR requested a culture touchpoint meeting with our team. Culture. When culture appears in your calendar unannounced, something structural is shifting. We gathered in the conference room again, the same polished table, the same filtered light. But this time, my manager wasn't leading. HR stood at the front. We want to reiterate our commitment to transparent compensation practices, they began. Employees who meet defined thresholds will receive earned incentives without discretionary alteration. Without discretionary alteration. The phrase landed with quiet finality. A few glances flickered in my direction. Not pity, not fear, recognition. After the meeting, Martin caught up with me near the coffee machine. I almost didn't check Appendix C, he admitted. You should always check Appendix C, I said lightly. He hesitated. He told me mine was safe because I'd aligned priorities. Aligned priorities, I held his gaze. Did you? A pause. No. Interesting. Back at my desk, another email waited, from Corporate Counsel. Subject, documentation review. Complete short, direct. The internal revision file was created and circulated without required approvals. Appropriate corrective measures are underway. Corrective measures. Language again doing careful work. There was no dramatic announcement, no public reprimand, no spectacle, just process, just governance, just quiet recalibration. At 2:40 p.m., I saw him through the glass wall of the director's office, not standing, sitting, hands folded, listening, legal beside him again, notepad open. He no longer looked like someone managing a narrative. He looked like someone answering questions, and the difference between those two positions is everything. By late afternoon, an updated org chart quietly appeared on the internal portal. Effective immediately, interim oversight of our division would transition to senior director. Finance pending, leadership review. Leadership review. His title was still there, but the authority beneath it felt thinner. Power, I realized, is often loud until it's examined. Then it becomes procedural. That evening, as I packed my bag, the office windows reflected the city in streaks of amber and steel. The same view as yesterday, the same desks, the same fluorescent hum. But the atmosphere had changed, not because I had fought, because I had documented, not because I had shouted, because I had quoted. Appendix C had done the rest, and somewhere in a folder now permanently archived, metadata told a story that couldn't be edited. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had tried to hide behind new policy. Instead, policy became the mirror, and mirrors, once angled correctly, are impossible to ignore. By Monday, the word interim had quietly disappeared. No announcement, no dramatic farewell email. Just an updated org chart and a brief note from HR thanking my manager for his contributions during transition. Transition. It's a gentle word for an abrupt ending. His glass office was cleared by noon. The framed leadership award was gone. The ergonomic chair replaced by a standard issue one. The nameplate removed so cleanly it left no outline, as if he had never been there at all. But absence has texture. You could feel it in the air. The senior director now occupied the office twice a week. On her first morning seated there, she called a division-wide meeting, not in the conference room, but out on the floor. No walls, no frosted glass. She stood beside the windows, sunlight cutting across the desks in sharp, honest lines. "I want to address the recent policy review," she said calmly. "Governance exists to protect both the company and its people. When process is bypassed, trust erodes. We will not allow that here." Not allow. The phrasing wasn't emotional. It was structural. She didn't mention me. She didn't need to. After the meeting, something subtle but undeniable happened. People started asking better questions. In project briefings, someone would say, "Is that documented?" In budget calls, someone would add, "Let's confirm against the policy." In performance check-ins, managers referenced thresholds instead of impressions. Language shifted, and language shapes power. Later that afternoon, HR stopped by my desk. "We appreciate your professionalism," they said. "You handled the situation constructively." Constructively, not aggressively, not confrontationally. Constructively. "I referenced the policy," I replied. They smiled. "Exactly." By midweek, I received another email, this one from Compensation Committee directly. Subject: Appreciation for Policy Diligence Appreciation. It acknowledged the importance of employees engaging with official documentation and reaffirmed that Appendix C would remain unchanged pending formal review. Remain unchanged. A clause once nearly rewritten in silence was now under visible protection. The quiet satisfaction that settled over me wasn't triumphant. It was steadier than that. It felt earned. On Thursday evening, as I stayed late finishing a report, voluntarily this time, the office felt different. Not tense, not charged, balanced. Martin rolled his chair over. "So," he said carefully, "what made you email legal instead of just letting it go?" I looked at the skyline through the glass, lights flickering on one by one like measured decisions. "I didn't email legal to win," I said. "I emailed to clarify." He nodded slowly. Same thing, he murmured. But it wasn't. Winning would have required someone to lose loudly. Clarifying required the system to correct itself. There's a difference. As I shut down my computer, I opened the bonus policy one last time. Appendix C glowed on the screen, unchanged, precise, almost understated. Shall receive. 2 words. Simple. Unmovable. I thought about how close those words had come to being quietly replaced with something softer, something negotiable, may, eligible for consideration. Subject to leadership review, all the phrases that blur certainty into permission. Instead, the clause remained, not because it was dramatic, but because it was documented. When I stepped into the elevator, the doors closed with a soft metallic sigh. My reflection looked different from the woman who had stood there days ago after reading that 6:42 p.m. email. Not harder, clearer. Policies will always exist. So will power. So will people who test the edges of both. But now, when someone says, new policy, I don't hear a closed door. I hear a question, and questions, when asked calmly and in writing, tend to travel further than anyone expects. As the elevator descended, my phone buzzed once more, a notification from the internal portal. Compensation governance training, mandatory for all managers. Scheduled next week, Appendix C listed as required pre-reading. I smiled, not because someone had fallen, but because the structure had stood. And in a world built of glass offices and quiet emails, that's sometimes the strongest kind of victory. The training invitation changed everything and almost nothing. On the surface, the office returned to rhythm. Quarterly targets, forecast models, coffee rings on desks like faint halos of overcommitment. Deadlines marched forward, indifferent to recent turbulence. But underneath, the architecture had been reinforced. The compensation governance training took place in the largest conference room, the one reserved for investor calls and executive briefings. This time, every manager attended, laptops open, cameras on for remote participants. No one opted out. Appendix C appeared on the first slide, not buried, not minimized, projected in clean black font across 12 feet of screen. Today, Legal began, we're reviewing the importance of policy integrity. Integrity, a word that sounds abstract until it's tested. The session wasn't accusatory, it was surgical. It walked through approval pathways, metadata tracking, version control, compensation committee oversight. Every step that should have existed before any internal revision file ever left someone's desktop. On slide 6, Legal paused. When performance thresholds are defined contractually, counsel said evenly, they are binding. Discretion cannot be retroactively introduced. Retroactively introduced, a precise description without naming the event. Across the table, managers shifted in their seats, not in discomfort, but in recalibration. Notes were taken, questions were asked, not defensive ones, clarifying ones. That shift mattered more than any apology. After the session, the senior director lingered near the window. I approached, not out of obligation, but instinct. You handled this well, she said quietly. I followed the policy, I replied. She nodded once. That's leadership. Leadership, the word settled differently than it once had. Later that afternoon, an email circulated division-wide. Subject, governance enhancements, effective immediately. It outlined 3 updates. All compensation policy changes require documented compensation committee approval. Policy revisions must be communicated company-wide prior to enforcement. Appendix C will undergo formal review annually with employee visibility. Employee visibility. Transparency, formalized. My name was nowhere in the memo. It didn't need to be. By early evening, the glass office was reassigned, not to a replacement, but converted into a shared strategy room. The frosted panels were removed, clear glass installed. You could see straight through now, from one end of the floor to the other. Visibility again. As the weeks passed, something unexpected happened. Colleagues began forwarding me draft documents before signing them. Quick eyes? Does this clause look standard? Would you interpret this the same way? I became, unofficially, the person who read the footnotes. Not loudly, not ceremonially, just consistently. And with that came a quiet shift in reputation. Not the kind built on confrontation, but the kind built on steadiness. One afternoon, Martin stopped by holding a printed offer letter from another department. "They've included performance thresholds," he said. "Clear ones." I skimmed the page. Defined metrics, defined payout, no vague discretionary override. Appendix C language, mirrored. "Looks solid," I said. He smiled. "You changed things." I shook my head gently. The policy changed things. But I understood what he meant. Months later, during annual review season, the senior director introduced a new slide in the all-hands presentation. Title: Trust Through Process. Beneath it, a single line: "Policies are promises." No one applauded. This wasn't that kind of office, but something steadier took root. Trust stopped being assumed and started being built, clause by clause, approval by approval. And sometimes, when the afternoon light hits the glass just right, I think about that original sentence. Your bonus isn't going through. New policy. It sounded final. It sounded immovable. But policies are not weather systems. They are written, approved, tracked, governed, and when someone tries to bend them quietly, they leave fingerprints. The real victory wasn't the bonus. It wasn't even the correction. It was the precedent. Now, when new hires join and skim through onboarding documents, Appendix C isn't just another clause. It's cited in training, discussed in meetings, understood. 2 words remain exactly as they were: shall receive, steady, clear, binding. The office still hums with fluorescent light and quarterly pressure. There will always be new managers, new memos, new attempts at alignment. But there will also be documentation. There will be visibility. There will be questions. And somewhere in a shared drive, metadata quietly remembers that once someone tried to rewrite a promise after the results were in. They didn't succeed. Not because I fought. Because I read. And in a world of polished tables and careful language, sometimes the most powerful move is simply pressing send.